as you get more involved into surfing, you're going to want to understand more and more about the ocean because it's just going to make you a better surfer, and it's honestly really fun to learn about. When it comes to understanding currents and tides, this is like a very brief introduction into those. Because in order to understand surf spots, you're going to have to understand how the tide and the currents associated with them affect the way the waves break and whether or not you want to go out there. Because there are some spots that will just be completely flat at high tide and absolutely ripping at low tide. Vice versa, some will be best and not really surfable anything outside of mid tide. Tides are a product and a relationship between the position of the moon and the earth. So as the earth spins with relation to the moon and your certain location, tides will go up and down because the moon has such a strong gravity pull that it's enough to kind of like pull the bulge of seawater around the earth. Generally speaking, you have 2 high tides and 2 low tides per day. Each tide is about 6.5 hours, so that you notice every day there is a bit of a shift of the timing and the highs and the lows. And that's really important to keep track of because there are certain days where you'll go out and it's super, super low tide. 3 or 4 days later, it's like kind of a mid tide in that same time zone. That's about it for the tides for this episode. I think I could go on and yap about these for quite some time, but I'm gonna keep this one nice and simple. Moving on to currents. There are 2 types of current that you really need to be focused on in the ocean. Longshore current, which runs along the shore, and rip currents. Contrary to popular belief, there is no such thing as a rip tide. That song that everyone was blasting for so long, I hated it because there's no such thing. Oh my gosh. Longshore current is a product generally of the swell direction. So you'll notice if you live in Southern California and you're in the summertime and there's a south swell, so a swell that is coming from the southern hemisphere, it will be pushing swell from the south to the north. And that naturally will push the current of the local water from the south to the north, at least along the shore. That's really important to understand because if you're surfing somewhere near like a jetty, which is like a long pile of rocks that sticks out into the ocean, or a pier, you're gonna wanna be mindful in that, oh, okay, like I know that there's a big south swell in the water today. The current is gonna be pulling me into the pier, so I should be mindful of that and go further away from the pier or on the north side of the pier. The same thing goes if the swell is coming from the north or the west where the current is pushing the other direction. Rip currents form because the waves are pushing water in, right? Consistently pushing water in, and the water goes up the beach and has to go back out and it has to go somewhere else. So if you're surfing somewhere like a beach break, it's gonna naturally pick somewhere along the sandbar that's the easiest for the water to flow down, similar to the way that rivers form. And it creates this cyclic effect where the water will pull you straight out, and sometimes you can even use that to your advantage when you're paddling out. Naturally, rip currents form against structures because the water has nowhere else to go. So if you're surfing somewhere like Oceanside, where there's a handful of jetties or piers, you'll notice that on a south swell, the rip currents will form along the north side of the jetty because all of the water is pushing up into the jetty, around it, and then getting flushed back in and going out alongside it. Vice versa for if there's a north swell. So the combination of the northerly longshore current pushing into the rocks is going to force all of that water out and along the jetty. A quick bit on safety. If you ever get stuck in rip current, honestly, rip currents are our best friends for surfing when it comes to paddling out. If you ever get stuck, paddle perpendicular, particularly in the direction that the longshore current is moving. You don't have to, but that's a good tip because once you get out of the current, it's just gonna start pulling you down the beach. That's it for basic tides and rip currents for this episode. There's gonna be much more detailed when it comes to safety and understanding them and everything else, but just a quick intro, like if you just wanted to watch all these videos, this is a great place to start. As always, hit me up if you have any questions, put it in the forum, bring it on the coaching call, whatever it is. We'll see you in the next one.